You good up there, sound man? Just making sure. Oh, Grady's up there. Yeah, we're good. So, all right. So good to see everyone this morning. I was trying to get my camera to come up on my phone. I'm having trouble getting my phone connected, so I couldn't see who all was out in the parking lot. So I said, well, I guess we'll just start. So if you have your Bible, turn to 2 Kings chapter number 4. 2 Kings chapter number 4. And we will pick up where we left off last week. So last week we spoke about the first 7 verses. Spoke about the widow woman who she was a wife of one of the sons of the prophets who passed away. And she went to Elisha with the problem that the debt collector had come and was going to take her 2 boys away. She didn't pay her debt, and Elisha said, "Hey, tell me what can I do for you? What do you got in the house?" And she's like, "Hey, I got all I got's a little bit of oil." And God used what she had and her faith and solved her problem. And so this chapter right here, it's interesting because it's two different women, and the 2 different ladies that are in this, to me, have 2 different personalities. And so the one lady, the first part of the chapter right here that we went through last week, she was a very dependent woman. She was very dependent on her husband, and she was very dependent on Elisha, and she just didn't know what to do. And the lady we're going to look at this week, she knew what she wanted. She knew what she wanted to do, and she was still. We're going to see it that she was still in subjection to her husband, but she knew her own mind. She knew her own mind. She knew what she wanted. She knew what she wanted to do, and so we're going to see that as it plays out in the chapter right here. So in verse number 8, it says, "And it fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunem, where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed and a table and a stool and a candlestick. And it shall be when he cometh to us that he shall turn in thither. And it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned into the chamber and lay there. And he said to Gehazi his servant, Call this Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, Say now unto her, Behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldest thou be spoken for to the king or to the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among mine own people. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Verily she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And he said, About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. And the woman conceived and bare a son at the season that Elisha had said unto her, according to the time of life. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, My head, my head. And he said to a lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut the door upon him and went out. And she called unto her husband and said, Send me, I pray thee, one of the young men and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God and come again. And he said, Wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, It shall be well. Then she saddled an ass and said to her servant, Drive and go forward. Slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went and came unto the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to Gehazi his servant, and behold, yonder is that Shunammite. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, Is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, It is well. And when she came to the man of God, to the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to thrust her away, and the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. Then she said, Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, Gird up thy loins, take my staff in thine hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not, and if any salute thee, answer him not again, and lay my staff upon the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. And Gehazi passed on before them, and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went out again to meet him, and told him, saying, The child is not awaked. And when Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead and laid upon his bed. He went in therefore, and shut the door upon them twain, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, Call the Shunammite. So he called her, and when she was come in unto him, he said, Take up thy son. Then she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground and took up her son and went out. I'll stop reading right there. And so that's the entire passage. I do not believe that we'll get through the entire passage this morning in Sunday school, but I wanted to read the entire passage so that we had it fresh on our minds anytime we reference something. And so in verse number 8, we have the Elisha is just passing through Shunem. He's just passing through, Brother Parks. And this woman sees Elisha passing through, and no doubt she'd heard about Elisha. Maybe she'd heard about the previous story right here where the widow had the debt collector had come and he was going to take her children from her. And she heard about Elisha and the stories of already what Elisha had done after taking over for Elijah. And so Elisha is coming by, and she sees him. And she's like, hey, I want him to come to my house. I want him to come to my house. Now it says right here, it fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunem, where was a great woman. And so first thing, I'm gonna get ahead of myself here. I got something on my brain, and I'm gonna get ahead of myself. But anyway, the first thing I want us to look at in this chapter was that the Bible says she was a great woman. She was a great woman. Now, when you look at that in the context, and when you look it up in the concordance, it appears that great woman means she's a little bit older in age. It appears that she was a little bit older in age. But whenever I read this passage right here, I cannot get over the fact that I think this woman was, in the sense how we would call a woman a great woman. This woman was a great woman. And there were some things about this woman that was great about her. And so it wasn't just that she was a little bit older in age. Obviously her husband was much older in age, that we're going to see that Gehazi tells Elisha that whenever he's like, hey, she can't have a son, she can't have a child, and her husband is way old. But in this passage right here, we see that she was a great woman. And one of the things that she was great in, first thing that she was great in, was for her respect for the man of God. This woman had a great respect for the man of God. Whenever Elisha came by, she's like, hey, I want to do something for him. I want to do something for him. I want to treat him special. I mean, you got to think about, I thought about it, nowadays we live in basically the lap of luxury. We have heated houses. We have cars that we drive everywhere we go. The cars that we drive, if it's cold outside, we got heated seats. If it's warm outside, you got cooled seats. You got air conditioning in your car. You know, you can push button start your car from your house. You push button start it, it turns on, and by the time you walk out of the house, all the ice is melted off of the car, and it's already warm. And so we live a life of luxury. If you want food, you got a grocery store to go to. If you want something, if you haven't been to the grocery store, you got 250 restaurants in Calhoun, Georgia to eat at. And you drive through a drive-through, and whatever you want, it's there. But you got to think, whenever Elijah was going somewhere, Elijah and Elisha, whenever they were going somewhere, they were mostly walking. They were mostly walking to where they were going. Maybe they rode an animal, but you don't hear about it much. If they did, most of the time they were walking, and and you know how it is. If you ever get out and walk somewhere, we used to go hiking. You can tell by my looks, it's been a while since we've been hiking, or if we do go hiking, we don't hike very far. But we used to go hiking, and whenever we went hiking, I would get thirsty. I would get thirsty, Brother Parks. Went back. I'll tell you how long ago it's been since we went hiking. I had one of them backpack things, and Grady would ride in the backpack, and he would grab trees and hold on to trees and everything else while we were hiking. So, Grady's 12 right now, so you can imagine how long it's been since we were hiking. So probably 10 years since we did a lot of it. But we used to do a lot of it. We went to Cloudland Canyon. We went down to Red Top. We went all around to all the state parks, and we just hiked. But you get out there hiking, and I just get thirsty. So I'm like, I want someone toting a water bottle. I want something to drink. But here's Elisha, and he's walking to these places as he's ministering to these people. And right here, this woman's like, that man has got to be thirsty. He's got to be thirsty. He's got to be hungry. And so she saw that. She saw the need. And Brother Randy's been teaching about different gifts, and some people just have a gift that they see a need. That's not my gift. They see a need, and they're like, hey, someone needs to do something about that. I do kind of have that gift. I can say, hey, someone needs to do something about that. But my wife has the gift to say, hey, there's a need. I need to do something about that. So we have a different gift. My gift is the gift of delegation. My wife is the gift of, hey, I'll do it. But you see that this woman, she had compassion on the man of God. She had this great respect for this man of God, and she saw him, and she's like, hey, I want me and my husband to get to know this man of God better. And you see what she says after he come by a few times. She said, I perceive that you're a holy man of God. It's one thing to hear about people. You hear about this person, he's a great person, this person is a great person. But once you experience it for yourself, it changes things. Sometimes me and the guys at work, one of the guys at work, he's a big Braves guy. He's a big Atlanta Braves guy. And we've all had our experiences where, and I don't call them heroes because I just don't think they're heroes, But some people call them like sports heroes or whatever. Like I said, you're not going to hear me say that. They're just people. But anyway, you have this respect for these people because they're doing a job that you wished you could do, but you weren't talented enough to do. And we all have these stories where we met these people, and we were really disappointed in them when we met them. I met someone, I won't name his name, but he was the former pitching coach of the Braves. And the first time I met him, I was probably 13 or 14 years old, Brother Parks, and he was actually from the town over from where I grew up. And he was at a little baseball card signing back when I was a kid, and it was a baseball card signing thing. And he was such a jerk. you're just a little kid. You had to pay money to get in there, and they're going to sign your card. And all you got to do is be nice to people. Even if you don't like them, all you got to do is be nice. You only had to be nice for just a few minutes. It was only like a 2-hour card show or whatever. But no, he was such a jerk to people. And I'm looking, that's 30-some years ago. And you know what my opinion of that person is? Still to this day, that person was such a jerk. And so all you had to do was be nice. But you hear about him and you listen, you hear about him, oh, he's such a good this, such a good that. And then you meet him, you're like, I don't know why everyone thinks so much of him. That was not the case with Elisha. Elisha was as advertised. He was as advertised. He was as good a man as he was advertised to be. He was a holy man. He didn't come in and take advantage of the situation, but he accepted their hospitality, and he also returned some hospitality back to them. And so another thing that she would have noticed just about Elisha was how he treated his servant. You know, it's one thing if you treat someone that you feel like is on your same level, if you treat them with respect. But it's a whole other thing, and again, you know, I'm not justifying feeling this way, but when you have a servant, that servant is under you, it's on a level below you. And so how you treat your servant means a lot about how, you know, about you as a person. And so she saw that, and she saw that he was a holy man of God, and she had respect. She had respect for the man of God. She continually down through this chapter, we're not going to go through everything, but we'll get to it eventually. But she had respect for the man of God. She had hospitality. We talked about that. She had humility. She had humility. I mean, this woman was not a woman of no means. It wasn't like the person in the very first section. She didn't have anything. Elisha's like, hey, what do you got? And she's like, all I got's this little thing of oil. She didn't have anything. She was in debt. She was about to lose her kids. She's like, I got nothing. You can understand people like that are humble, but it's when someone has something and they still have humility, they still have respect. It's like, hey, you need to respect me because I'm doing this for you. No, she was humble. She was humble, but she was also content. She was a contented woman. She was content. Whenever Elisha said, hey, would you like for me to speak to the king? Would you like for me to speak to let me look right there. In verse number, to the captain of the host, would you like for me to speak? Would you like? And she's like, I dwell among my own people. She was content. You'll never be great until you learn to be content. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't constantly be pressing on and pressing forward and looking for stuff, but Paul said he was content, whatever state he was in. He was content. You know, and so we need to learn that whatever state God has us in, to be satisfied with that state that God has us in. You know, whether we're doing great or whether we're abounding or whether we're abased, whatever we are, we need to learn to be content with what God has done for us and what God is doing for us. She was a woman of conviction. She was a woman of conviction. She had in her mind, and let me say this because I don't think I've said it enough as we've gone through this. Elisha was a man. Elisha was a man. The power was not in the man. The power was not even in the mantle. The power was in the man of God. The power was because he was plugged into the power source, which was God. So anytime I reference Elisha, I want us to always understand and never mistake the fact that I'm not saying that Elisha was the power. The power came through Elisha from God. And so just in case I don't say that enough, and I thought about it during the week, I'm like, you know what? I need to make sure that I don't, I understand and we understand that any man of God, that power comes from God. That power comes because he is connected to God. The power comes because he is dedicated to God, and that power flows through. God allows that power to flow through him, not because of him. And so we have respect for men of God, but we also understand that they're just men. You're going to see in this chapter, this is the first time that I see that Elisha failed. This chapter, the first time Elisha fails, the first time that because he was always coming up with stuff off the cuff. What he did to the widow woman was like, hey, what do you got? Oil. Okay, we'll go borrow a bunch of vessels. He just come up with that off the cuff, go borrow a bunch of vessels and fill them up. But this is the first time that you see Elisha fail. He failed because he said, Gehazi, here's my staff, go take it and lay it upon the child. And God said, no. So even Elisha, as much right as Elisha did, even sometimes Elisha missed the mark a little bit. He missed the mark just a little bit. We understand that, I mean, he came in, we read it, he came in after Gehazi come back and said, hey, he's still sleeping. He come in and he walked around the room and prayed. He's like, God, you're going to have to help me with this right here. This was the first time that I saw where Elisha had a failure. And Elisha was a man that had to learn, hey, it's not me, it's God, and I have to find God and what God wants to do, not just, hey, I think this will work. That's the first time Elisha missed it. But I want you to understand, back to this great woman, she had conviction. She felt like Elisha knew God and that God had the power to do what she wanted done. I mean, we're going to get to it eventually, but when that child died, there was not a single moment's hesitation in her. She carried that child up. She didn't get bitter. She didn't get angry. She carried that child up, laid that child right down on that bed of that man of God, and she said, hey, I need a young man, and I need an ass to ride. And I need to be able to go to the man of God. And her husband's like, well, it's not new moon, it's not Sabbath, what in the world? And so she had faith that man of God, the same man of God that she had been good to, the same man of God that had been good to her, the same man of God that said, hey, even though you feel like you're never going to have a child, God's going to give you a child. The same man of God that told her that was going to happen, and it did happen. She had enough faith to believe that even though her son had passed away, that he could be raised from the dead. Now, it didn't happen very often. But this woman had enough faith, enough conviction to believe that Jehovah God, working through Elisha, could raise her son back up. She had conviction, and she was not going to be turned aside. She was not going to be turned aside. She was not concerned with the least. She told the lad, she said, drive, don't worry about me. She's like, drive, don't even worry about me. Unless I tell you to, don't stop till we get there. And so whenever Elisha sent Gehazi, she told Elisha, she said, I'm not leaving you. She said, and it's interesting, we talked about this last week. Sometimes a woman has more perception than a man does. Sometimes a woman has more perception than a man does. Sometimes a woman sees stuff that men just don't see. You'll see this, but sometimes even Elisha, whenever he's like, hey, do you want me to speak to the king? Do you want me to speak to the captain of the host? It was Gehazi, his servant, that had to say, you're missing something here. As men, sometimes we have tunnel vision. We have tunnel vision. We only see what's in our little tunnel right there. We don't have any peripheral vision, anything like that. Sometimes my wife will send me to look for something. She knows better now. We've been married long enough. She knows that, that I'm not going to find it. So she's just wasting her time to tell me to go look for something. And so this morning I had Grady write out checks yesterday. And I'm like, Grady, where's the checkbook? He's like, it's right up there. And I'm like, Grady, where is it? So he come up, he looked for it. So finally I'm like, just get one out of the, where we keep the extra checks. And I turned around and it was over somewhere else. I'm just training Grady that's how men do. We only look where we think it should have been. And if it's not where we think it should have been, it's not going to be anywhere else because it should have been right there. And you just keep looking in that one spot and you're like, it has to be here. And so we flipped through the papers about 4 different times before finally we're like, oh well, it must be gone. We'll just do something else. And then we turned around. It was on another thing where he wrote the checks out. But as a man, we just get this, and so we have that tunnel vision. We have that vision that, sometimes we just don't see stuff. But she was not that way. She saw that Gehazi was not everything he was cracked up to be. She saw that, hey, Gehazi's not going to be the one to raise my son. Gehazi's not going to be the one. She told him, she said, look, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving you. The only person that's going to get this job done is you, because you're the one plugged into the source. Gehazi's not plugged into the source. We'll see. We saw that in chapter 5. We saw that in chapter 5, at the end of chapter 5, that Gehazi was not plugged into the source. He was not plugged into the source. But this woman, she saw that. She had conviction. She had composure. She had composure. I mean, can you imagine? Her son has died. Her son has died. This child that no doubt she prayed for years and years and years and years and years, till you get to the point where you're just not going to pray about it anymore. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so here comes Elisha, and he's like, hey, what can I do for you? And she doesn't even say it, Chris. She doesn't even come out and say, I've never had a child. She had got to the point where she didn't even say it. So you can imagine how precious this child was. I mean, everyone's seen parents. Everyone's seen parents that are so overprotective of their children, they're just over the top. They're just over the top, Miss Jimmy. I mean, my mother-in-law, y'all know I love my mother-in-law. I told her one of the best things that happened in my life was the day I made her my mother-in-law. And so, she's great. But all she ever had was girls. And Brother Park, the boys come around, and she's had grandboys for years and years, but they just roughhouse, and she just doesn't understand. And so, but you've all seen that parent that's just so protective. Sometimes it's the first child. The firstborn child is protected. And you can tell how many kids a parent's had, because that last child, they just let that last child do anything. They figured out the kids are pretty much indestructible. You can throw them in the dryer and run them around the dryer for about 30 minutes, pull them right back out, and they just take off going. Kids are pretty much indestructible. But you see parents that are just so protective, they just hover over their kids, and they want to protect them so much. And no doubt this woman, had to feel that way about this son, because she's like, hey, this is my one chance. This is my one chance. I'm not 21 years old, and I got 15 more years of the possibility, 16 more years of easily having children. No, this was her chance. Her husband was not getting any younger. It took a miracle for her to have this child to begin with. And so if it takes a miracle for you to have something, no doubt you're going to be overly protective of it. And when that child was sick, he came, they brought him to her, and she held him on her knee that day, and he died anyway. And she was so composed. She knew just what to do, Miss Jimmy. She was composed. She took him right up. She laid him down on the bed. She said, hey, I need this. I'm going to do this. And Elisha sent Gehazi and said, hey, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your child? She told Gehazi, it's all well. She was completely composed until she got to that man of God. And even in that, she's like, hey, I told you not to deceive me. And Elisha's reaction to me was amazing. He's like, God didn't let me in on this. Gehazi went to move her away, and he's like, whoa, stop. She's in turmoil. She's in turmoil. What's going on? And he's like, God hid this from me. God hid this. This was serious. And so, but she was composed. She was able to maintain her composure. She was not a basket case. We all know people that are basket cases. So, just the littlest thing happens and they just fall all to pieces. You got to get them put back together before you can handle the situation, because they're making matters worse instead of better. But she was a composed woman, and she had faith. She had faith. She believed. She believed when he said, hey, you're going to have a child. She said, don't you deceive me. And once he said, not deceiving you. Guess what? 9 months later, you know what we had? We had a child. When that child died, she didn't call for the grave diggers. She didn't send someone to Elisha to say, hey, you did deceive me. I had this child, but I expected this child to grow up. I mean, I'm not satisfied with just having this child for a few years. She had faith. You're going to see that she had faith. When the man of God comes a few chapters later and says, hey, you need to leave, you know what she done? She left. That man of God said, hey, there's going to be a famine in the land. You need to leave. She got up and left. Waited her 7 years, like the man of God said. When the famine was over, guess what? She came back. She came back. She was a great woman. She was a great woman. She had attributes that every woman should strive for. And so you see right here that in this first verse that we're looking at, verse number 8, it says, when Elisha passed the Shunem, where was a great woman, she constrained him to eat bread. It says she took hold of him. Miss Jimmy, she took hold of him and said, hey, I'm not going to let you say no. I'm not going to let you say no. It says she constrained him. She took hold of him and said, hey, I've made this bread and you're going to eat this bread. Again, I mean, some of us are like, ain't no woman going to talk to me like that. Ain't no woman going to talk to me like that. I mean, and Elisha, we all know, Elisha was a man. He was a grown-up man. He was not scared of the king. He was a man that plowed with, 12 yoke of oxen? He was a man. And here is this little older woman, and she's like, hey, come on. I baked this bread, and I baked this bread for you. And I want you to eat this bread. And you know what Elisha did? He ate bread. She constrained him. She's like, I want you to come eat this bread. And so he came and ate this bread. Now, it's one thing for someone to say, hey, I want you to come eat this because it's really good. But until you do the taste test, maybe she thinks it's good, but it's not so good, Justin. You ever had someone say, I am the best peach preserve maker that there has ever been. And you try the peach preserves, and they are the worst things you have ever put in your mouth. So so here's Elisha, and he's like, all right, lady, I'm going to come. I'm going to eat bread. I'm going to come to your house. I'm going to meet your husband, and I'll bring my servant, and we're going to eat bread. And so it says right there, she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither. So apparently, now, the commentary that I'm going to write, because it's not actually in the commentary, but the commentary I'm going to write is either going to be this was the original recipe that Bojangles found for the Bojangles biscuits, or, and I haven't decided which one, or it's the Krispy Kreme donut recipe, Chris. I'm not sure which one it is. I don't know which side of the thing you fall on, but apparently, Miss Jimmy, this was some good bread. This was some good bread. I mean, for me, I'm probably going to lean towards, I'm not a bread eater. I don't really care about bread, but I'm going to lean towards the Bojangle biscuit just because I like a Bojangle biscuit better than a donut. My wife and kids would probably lean toward the Krispy Kreme donut side of things because that's what it is. But you understand, Chris, that this was some good bread. This was some good bread. He ate that bread, and he's like, you know what? Maybe he made a few extra trips through Shunem because he's like, I tell you what. I mean, we used to hear about Miss Jimmy's house all the time. Like, hey, get to go to Miss Jimmy's house for lunch today. get to go to Miss Jimmy's house for lunch today. You get someone that's good at doing something. You're like, hey, Adriana makes her cakes. They're like, hey, Adriana, do you make one of your cakes? Adriana, you make one of your cakes? But you understand, apparently Elisha liked this bread. I was thinking about, for me, bread was never my thing. It's still not. Like I said, Krispy Kreme donut sign, the only reason my blood pressure raises when that hot, fresh sign comes on, there's only one reason, because I hope my kids don't see it as I'm driving by, because I don't want to pull in there. That's the only reason my blood pressure raises, when the hot, fresh sign is flashing. But I was never a big bread guy. But Brother Tyrone, whenever Brother Johnny Jones's wife, who just passed away, whenever she had her accident, she had her accident at the same day of the inauguration of George Bush, the second term. Correct? Is that correct? I believe it is. So anyway, she had her accident, and basically they said that she was going to be completely paralyzed. She was never going to walk at all again. And so one of the times they were going to send her in for a surgery, they called everyone and said, hey, will you fast and pray? Well, y'all know my job. I work on air compressors, and I go around to different places. Well, the day that they asked me to fast and pray, now remember, I'm not a bread guy. The day that they asked me to fast and pray was the day that I had to go to the bakery. And so normally when I go to the bakery, the air compressors are on the side where the bread is being made. So the dough is being made. So I either come right in the side and I work right in the air compressors, or I go around to the back and I come through the back door, and it's where the dough is being mixed up. And that doesn't smell good at all to me. They got the machines that are sitting there that are like kneading the dough and everything, and there's just raw dough on the floor, and they're like spraying it down with a water hose. It just smells awful. I just don't like it at all. But if you go all the way to the other end of the oven, to get to the maintenance area, you had to go all the way down. So you went through the whole process from the time it was being made to the time it was getting separated into whatever it was, till it was getting rolled out or smushed out into bun form, and then it was going through the oven. But to get to where I had to go, Justin, you had to go where the fresh rolls were dropping out of the oven. They're coming out of the oven. And again, I'm not a bread guy, but let me grab my verse right here. Let me grab my verse real quick. In Proverbs, the full soul loatheth an honeycomb, but to the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. And I was fasting again. I'm not going to get a reward for this fast anyway, so I'm telling y'all my story. I'm fasting, Chris, and you would be amazed at how many times I needed the maintenance guy and I couldn't get a hold of him on the phone, and how many times I had to make that long walk. And I knew what was going to happen, because again, if you can't eat, you want to eat everything. If you cannot eat, that's what you want to do. And so how many times I walked by that thing, and I would just walk by that oven, and those like 6-inch, I think they were honey butter rolls that were coming off of that thing, they looked so good, Miss Jimmy. They smelled so good. The workers were actually allowed to pick them up off the belt and go right into the break room and eat them. You as a contractor were not allowed to do that because they hadn't been through the scanner to make sure there was no metal. But I was real tempted that day to stick 4 or 5 of them in my pocket and take them back to the compressor room and eat them, even though I don't like bread. But I'm telling you, if you're on a journey like Elisha was on this journey, and maybe he didn't have anything with him, after the first time he ate her bread, Gehazi was like, hey, you want me to bring something? He's like, no, don't bring anything. We're stopping by her house today. We are stopping by her. She said, come eat bread anytime you want to. That woman makes some good bread. We're going to her house. We're going to her house because she made good bread. And so Elisha went to her house. And it says in verse number 9, she said unto her husband, behold, now I perceive that this is an holy man of God. So again, I talked about it a minute ago, but after seeing Elisha and watching his actions, watching how he treated her, watching how he treated her husband, watching how he treated his servant, she said, now I perceive. I'd heard it with my ears, but now I see it with my eyes. I heard it with my ears, but now I see it with my eyes. This is not like the prophets of Baal that are all out for themselves. This is a holy man of God right here. This man is different. And that should be said, and again, Brother Parks is a preacher, Chris is a preacher, Jay is a preacher, I'm sure our missionary is a preacher, but you understand, not all of us are preachers, but being just a preacher, there should be a testimony about each one of us in here that we're different. Have you ever had a relationship with someone and then you start talking to them about God and they're like, oh, I'm a Christian. And you get taken aback. Because you're like, well, I've never seen it. I've never seen it. I'm glad you can tell me that you're a Christian, but there's not one single thing that I've ever seen in your life that makes me think there's something different about that person. There is something different. There is something that they have something that I don't have. Y'all heard my testimony about Brother Henderson and Brother Johnny Jones. I saw something in them. They had something I didn't have. Has anyone ever saw something in you and said, hey, tell me, what makes you different? What better opportunity to witness than when someone looks at you and says, I saw how you handled that situation. That's not how I would have handled that situation. What made you where you could handle that situation that way? What made you different? What better opportunity to witness than when they see something about you that's like, I just need to ask. People don't know. You'd be amazed at the people in the United States of America that don't know the 10 Commandments. You would be amazed at the people that they've never been in church. They've never been in a church. All they know about church is what Hollywood tells them church people should be. And that's never a good thing. And they see something different in you, and they're like, hey, what is it about you that's different? And it gives you the opportunity. This woman saw, she brought Elisha into her house not knowing. But it wasn't very long that she told her husband, she said, hey, this guy's the real deal. This guy's the real deal. This guy is the real deal. I've never been uncomfortable around this man. Everything he says is appropriate. Everything he does is appropriate. He has respect for me. He has respect for you. He has respect for his servant. He's a good man. He's a holy. We leave that out a lot nowadays. We got a lot of people that want to be a man of God, but they want to leave that holy part out. Holy. Oh, that's Old Testament. No, it's not Old Testament. We as Christians, but especially men of God, should live a life that, like I said, people should not be able to point. They should not be able to point at us and be like, yeah, I won't go to church because that person goes there. I can't go to church because, and every one of us has heard it. Hey, I want you to come to church. I can't go to church. All they are a bunch of hypocrites. Yeah, you know what? A lot of times that's true. My response is, do you go to Walmart? Yeah, a bunch of hypocrites down there at Walmart. You go to work? Yeah, a bunch of hypocrites at work. 90% of the people that are at work don't want to be there. They're just there because they're getting paid. Percentage probably 50-50 at church, where 50% of the people don't want to be there and 50% of the people do. Actually got a better percentage. Hypocrites everywhere, so? But sometimes they'll tell you a specific story. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Got to tell them to get over it. You can't let one single person or one incident or one church that you went to keep you from going to heaven because you're mad because they did you wrong, or they did your mom and dad wrong, or they did anyone wrong. You can't let that happen. It happens all the time, but you can't let it happen. And so she saw in him that, hey, he was a man of God. They should see in us that we're different. And so she said in verse number 10, and my time is almost up. She said in verse number 10, she said, let us. Again, she knew what she wanted to do, but she respected her husband. She said, let us make a little chamber, I pray thee. So here she is, she's talking to her husband, and again, like I said, she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She's like, hey, this is what we want to do. I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. A lot of women nowadays would be like, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do it. I don't care what you say. I'm going to do it. But not her. She said, hey, let us, and I pray thee. Please, give me permission. Give me permission to do this. This is what I want to do, but I want it to not be me doing it. I want it to be us doing it. I want it to be us doing it. And I feel like she was such a good woman that if he'd have said no, she wouldn't have done it. If he'd have said no, Chris, I think she'd have said, all right, we won't do it. I don't think we're right. I don't think we're right, but because you said so, I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'm on the other end of the spectrum, Brother Parks. I'm always right. You know, I mean, as a man, in my mind, I'm always right, Miss Jimmy. And I don't want my wife to say, well, I don't think you're right. But it happens because I'm not always right. It does happen because I'm not always right. And it's difficult, Brother Tyrone, because, again, I mean, I'm right 99.9995% of the time, but it's that 0.005% of the time that she gets me on. But you understand, I mean, my wife, sometimes I say, hey, I don't think you're right here. And then I can do two things. I can do what my flesh wants to do, which is say, know your role. Get in your place. Don't tell me I'm wrong. Or I can do what God wants me to do and evaluate, pray about it, and again, sometimes she's right and I'm wrong. And it's difficult. I mean, I'm telling you, at 23 years of marriage, if it comes up this afternoon, she can say, you taught it in Sunday school this morning, and I'll be like, I know what I taught, but it's still difficult. It's just how it is. But this woman treated her husband in a way that he said, sure, no problem. If that's what you want to do, let's do it. I think he's a good man too. The husband doesn't appear to have very much of a relationship at all with Elisha. He doesn't appear to have very much. I mean, again, it's his house. It was his materials that she baked the bread out of. It was him, footing the bill to put the bed and the candlestick and the table and the chair there. But, I mean, he doesn't really appear to have a whole lot of relationship. They have the child. He has the child with him. Whenever the child gets sick and dies, she goes straight to Elisha. The husband, she doesn't say, hey, let's me and you go to Elisha. The child gets well. It's the mom that comes and gets the child. The husband doesn't have a whole lot of a relationship with Elisha. But what he had was enough, and his respect for his wife, to acknowledge the fact that, hey, she wants to do this. All right, I'll let her do it. And so it was a good marital relationship between that husband and wife. It was a good relationship. And so I'm going to stop right there. We'll stop on a good marital relationship. we'll get back to it next week.